Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome to the show. This is show 4. The listeners will be very happy, Brandon, to hear that Dr. Mo is back for the fourth show of the Grand Slam collection. So those of you who've been down in from the first one, we had one around the Masters, then around the PGA Championship, and then the U.S. Open, and of course now the Open Championship, which will be at Royal St. George's in Sandwich, Kent, England. This has been great, Brandon, because I think those listeners that, whether you're into golf or not, a lot of the lessons that you are hearing him talk about as far as practice and preparation and just, being dialed into the 4 R's and handling your off the course stuff. I mean, all of these things can be applied to life, to your work environment, whatever the case may be. So sure. I hope the listeners are listening to it with that kind of a mindset. Like,
I would think so. Yeah. And I would hope so. I mean, I know that, in this fourth episode, he talks about what gives you confidence, right? And it's being prepared. And one of the things I started thinking about is as a business leader, being prepared for that meeting or that presentation to the point where you can get up and talk in front of folks, and you're not really worried about it. The subject matter. You've done what you need to do to kind of be that subject matter expert. And, whether that's being the parent, the business leader, the athlete, whatever. I love, we talk a lot specifically with Dr. Mo around the golf athletes themselves, but I love that, the principles that you're talking about, John, and that he really dives into really are applicable across the board.
Yeah, the one thing, and I'm glad you brought this up, because when he talks about that, the importance of being committed over even being confident, because I think a lot of times in that business aspect, to make that connection for the listener, is people wait around for themselves to be confident, or they'll say, oh, I lack the confidence to do this or whatever. That it's not as important, like Dr. Mo says, as it is to just be committed to whatever that plan is. Like, make the plan and be committed to it, whether you're confident in that or not. Eventually that confidence will get there as you make enough of those committed actions. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, this is your first time, Dr. Morris Pickens, of course, is a sports psychologist on the PGA Tour. Lots of professional golfers he works with, lots of PGA victories, major championships. We're so blessed to have him be a part of this show and has joined us for these next, 3 or the last 4 times he's been on. And then, spoiler alert, he is going to be joining us again prior to the Ryder Cup this year, which we're really excited about having Dr. Mo back on. So enjoy this. As always, take some good notes, because as Brandon said, there's lots of things that are not just applicable to yourself on the golf course, but also in that boardroom or in wherever it is that you work, that you're going to be able to, do and use immediately.
Absolutely. And again, thanks listeners for all the feedback. Keep it coming. I think we've got a show coming up where we'll answer some more questions. So we certainly appreciate it.
Awesome. Here you go, Dr. Mo. Welcome back into the show, Dr. Mo, everybody's favorite. We've said this all the time, Mo, that I tell you, one of the most, and this is show 33, 34, something like that for us. And without fail, the guests that we hear the most comments about, and people say, hey, when are you having Dr. Mo back on? I keep saying to them, we've had a pretty simple format, right? Like we let everyone know it's the week before every major. So pay attention to the PGA schedule when you're looking for those appearances. But we're happy to have you back. Thanks for joining us again. I know it's a busy time for you right now.
Absolutely. Glad to be back. And hopefully they're not saying that just because they can't understand me. So.
That's right.
Well, we'll be honest. We're a little worried because there's no more majors after this one. We're like, when are we going to get our Dr. Mo?
How are we going to fill the show in?
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll figure out something. I mean, there's always the playoffs or the start of the new year or something.
There you go.
So, yeah, we'll get into a whole off-season thing. But
yeah.
But just to remind the listeners, and we talked a little bit about this in the intro, but this is show 4, as Brandon pointed out. This is around the Open Championship, which is going to be July 15th through the 18th, of course, there at Royal St. George's, Sandwich, Kent, England. What do you know about that course? I mean, what should the players be expecting from that one?
They should be expecting bad weather. I was there. I don't remember if it was the last time, but I was there the year that Darren Clark won. Okay. And one of my guys, Jonathan Bird, actually played with him the first 2 rounds. And Jonathan Bird's hitting these high shots. They're getting blown around like crazy. And Darren Clark's just like chipping these little 4 and 5 irons underneath the wind. It was awesome to watch. And Jay Bird missed a cut. And he ended up winning. So obviously we had the wrong game plan going. But it's a quirky kind of course. There's a fair amount of blind shots that guys don't like. The actual area that it's in, Royal St. George, is kind of down in the southern part, where you don't think about like a lot of the great golf courses over there, in Scotland and England. But, it's been a part of the rotation. I do think it does a good job of kind of weeding out guys because it's going to take a lot of resilience. You get some quirky bounces and you get some good things. And and then they also, one of the best things about there, like I can't remember, I got a buddy over there in England. That's another story for another time. The first year I went over, I basically got stranded and he picked me up at the airport. And I'm taking this trip with this guy I'd never met in my life for an hour and a half to Carnoustie. And I called my wife and she's like, "You're crazy. Go end up dead in the mountains of Scotland." So, but when we went down there a few years later, because we kept the relationship up, they have this salt marsh lamb that they have, and it's really great in that part of the country because these lamb they eat in the salt marshes, okay. And so it makes the meat really tender. And so I don't know, that's one of the highlights. It has nothing to do with golf, but you need to know where to eat when you go to all these places.
I guarantee it. Yeah,
so Dr. Mo.
Yeah,
hearing you talk about kind of quirky bounces and stuff like that, and just kind of a challenging course. It reminds me a little bit of. I'm assuming that your guys are really going to have to focus on the good, bad, good, bad type of mindset playing out there, huh?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that applies every week, but it really applies at this tournament, the Open Championship, because the grass over there is just not manicured and the fairways aren't kind of flat and consistent like they are here. And you can hit a lot of balls that, land what you think is in the middle of the fairway and get some crazy bounce straight left into a bunker. And, it works the other way. You can get some pretty bad shots that end up better than you deserve as well. But I think the main thing over there, especially with, the win that you can get, some of that is just, you got to play a lot of committed golf, maybe even more. I mean, you always want to be committed, but some of the challenges over there are some of the blind tee shots. And you really got to be able to pick a target in the distance that's a tower or some, tree, because you can't see where the ball is going to come down and commit to that. So your book preparation prior to Thursday is extremely important in this tournament, more so than say here in America, where pretty much you can see the majority of everything kind of in front of you. We don't play that many blind shots over here. So that, and then you get more of the conditions over there. And I remember one year we were somewhere else, and maybe it was Lytham, and Lucas Glover literally hit 8 balls on the range before we went to play. It was blowing so hard. and raining so hard that he hit 8 balls. We went in and basically changed clothes and went back out. And
Wow.
he was playing with Craig Perry. Craig Perry shot one of the best 74s I've ever seen in my life. It was just amazing. I mean, he's literally, Lucas is on the range, just blowing straight in. He hits his 4-iron probably, I don't know, 215, 220, and he's hitting them, and they're one hopping into the 150 sign.
Oh my gosh.
And, oh yeah. It was like, how are we supposed to club off of this? I said, I don't know. Good luck.
Well, and that's going to be a unique challenge because, we talk, of course, about the on the course stuff, but already it's like right as you're on that practice range and you're starting to see these elements and what it's going to do to your shots, that can start messing with you. But before you've even got to the first tee box, I mean, you're already starting to think like, oh, this is going to be one of those days.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And if you're not going into it with the attitude of, hey, this is fun and let's go see, and let's just, kind of buy into this is going to be a quirky day of golf. If you're expecting it to be like, okay, I hit a good shot and I'm going to get rewarded, you're going to be disappointed. And so you really got to have the mindset of just, play this hole and accept whatever happens and go to the next one. So, it's great in that. The one thing that's really more unusual at this tournament is the draw can be extremely important because you always tee off kind of late, early type thing. And, if you get some of those storms that come through over there, guys can play from 7 in the morning to 11 and is, perfect, just like it is, on a nice, cool summer night over here somewhere. And then, by 2:00, a squall has come in, and you think like, oh my gosh, I'm in the African rainforest, and some tiger's getting ready to jump out from one of these ferns over here and attack me.
That's got to be just one of those things. But it's really important. Is one of my favorite Dr. Mo sayings is invite the challenge. But that's one of those things, like you said, just enjoying it and just saying, hey, you know what? We're all dealing with the same stuff here. I'm just going to go out here and play. Yeah.
That's there's a couple things over there that are easier, and so you do have. Like the greens are not going to be lightning fast. You're not going to be worried about the ball kind of getting away from you, or that you're going to 3-putt a ton because the greens are so fast. And so there are some elements where you're like, okay. And most of the time, the way those golf courses are built, there's depending on the wind, every day, a few of these holes are going to be pretty difficult, but a few of these holes are going to be fairly easy. Depending on if they're downwind a certain day, and that makes it hard in the practice round as well, because you play a hole downwind and this bunker, you don't even see this bunker. And then you turn around and play it into the wind and you're like, I never even knew that bunker was there. And you just ended up in it. Now you're chipping out. And,
and you need a ladder to get in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so that part's, it's just so different. And I think the biggest thing about this is if you go over there and it's different and you accept that it's going to be different and you buy into, hey, I'm going to like this just because it's only 1 week we get to do this, and I'm going to hit some cool shots and I'm going to try some new things. But if you're going over there with the mindset of, this is another week on tour and I should get exactly what I'm due, then, it's going to be a long week.
Yeah.
So
do you find it a challenge though, Mo, with your players that on those holes that are easy, it's kind of that grind. I think the natural reaction would be, okay, this is a pretty easy hole. I don't have to mentally be dialed in as much, but that may be when you've got to be dialed in the most, right? So, because that's maybe your only scoring.
Right. Well, yeah, you can definitely make the mistake of kind of just checking out when you get the easier downwind holes. And so, yeah, you got to be ready for both. And you need to, a lot of the courses over there, 9 holes go out, 9 holes come back. And I don't think St. George is exactly that way. But, what happens is you kind of know, like, okay, hey, if I'm getting ready to be into this wind stretch, right? Well, when you're playing into the wind, the holes are going to play longer. The curve on the ball gets accentuated. So like physically, it can be more demanding, right? And then it's easier downwind because the ball is not going to curve as much because the wind's going to help it just stay straighter. And then the holes obviously play shorter. And so, and most of the time they don't have a lot of trouble in front of the greens over there. So you can land it fairly short and it'll run up, that sort of thing. So I think they're different in the sense of it's almost like you almost have to have a into the wind mindset and a downwind mindset. Because you're probably going to get 4 or 5 of those holes in a row of each kind. And so it's like, okay, hey, it's not like where we just where San Diego, where, oh my gosh, every hole is difficult, and every hole is just, you got to switch within the day. Like, oh man, this is my quote easy stretch. And then, and you can't let that get you down if you happen to start into the wind and you're, kind of immediately 3 over through 5, but you see another guy who's playing the downwind and he's 2 under through 5. It's easy to, think you're further behind than you are just because of where you are on the golf course. So,
but we're excited to watch them go through these challenges. And, one of the things, Mo, we've learned, and I don't really think it was that much of a learning situation as much as it just reinforced. This series with you has really reinforced it. Is we've just been talking about the major tournaments and all the unique challenges that each one of those have, but this is the PGA Tour. I mean, it's every week these guys. I mean, at the John Deere this weekend, that's just as much of a challenge for these guys to go out there and do that as any weekend, right? I mean, it's just everybody. You're always going to have a series of challenges, and that's what's really important from that mental side of it. Why it's so important for folks like yourself to be able to help those guys out there, because every week on the tour is going to be a grind.
Yeah. And every week presents different challenges, like here this week at the John Deere, the challenge, if you're teeing off tomorrow afternoon, is somebody's going to already have shot 8 under in the morning. And you go out and you're even par through 4. And now you're starting to press and I need to be 2 under. And you can, it's real easy to kind of start forcing things and getting impatient when you're playing a golf course where typically the winning score is in the high teens or in the 20s, under par. So it's a different challenge. And the guys who are really good, elite level players, they know how to get the right mindset for 20 under, and they know how to get the right mindset when even par is going to win.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's put a bow on this thing tonight. We've had the privilege of having you for 4 shows now with this Grand Slam collection. And we've had show 1, of course, was all around preview and prep and practice. And then show 2 was about off the course stuff, taking care of your crap, so to speak. And then on the course was show 3, and show 4 is going to be the kind of the continuation of that. We started at the end of show 3 to unpack the 4 R's. Of course, the first 2 being refocus and routine. Let's pick up, if you would, Mo, where we left off there and start talking a little bit about those 3rd and 4th R's, which is react and relax.
Right. And so I think, in terms of where we left off, at the end of your routine, you've made your decision in the refocus and you go through your routine. You're trying to trust your routine to hit the shot for you. And then react has 2 meanings. And the first meaning is reacting to the target. So that's an athletic reaction where hopefully you're taking your last look at your target, and then you come back to the ball and then you let yourself swing. And the whole idea is to be free through impact. And when you're really reacting and you're athletic, that's what happens. The opposite of reacting to the target would be where you're trying to guide the ball or steer the ball or wish the ball into the hole, right? And it's basically you're just trying to gain more control, usually because you're fearful of some result. And so you have this false belief that, if I kind of slow down and guide this, it'll turn out better. And most of the time that doesn't happen. So just because that's not the physical movement that you're used to making. And yes, you can swing too hard and you can kind of get out of your element. But, the main thing is that just getting in your mind, like, okay, hey, I'm going to let myself react to this target. And then once that's done, once the ball's in the air, right, then it kind of starts to unfold in terms of the different scenarios. So, and those different scenarios are, if the ball's going where you intended for it to go, you basically immediately just kind of start relaxing, and eventually I'll get prepared for the next shot, right? But the other meaning of react is reacting to the shot. So, and that is, whereas the first meaning is more of an athletic reaction, the second meaning of react is your emotional reaction to the shot. And if it's a good shot, it's a minimal in terms of emotion. Maybe you're a little excited if you hit a good shot or that sort of thing, but it's more when you hit a poor shot, then what happens, right? I mean, I don't answer too many questions about, hey, what should I do when I'm playing really good? Right. I don't get that question a lot. It's much more, hey, what am I supposed to do when I'm playing like crap?
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing that I would tell listeners is, you've hit this shot, especially in the long game. What you want to have, what you want to build in, is what we call an immediate positive reaction. And an immediate positive reaction is just training yourself to say things like, give me a good lie, or get a good bounce, or give me a break. Most people's expressions after a poor shot are simply habits that they've allowed themselves to get into. I can't believe I did that. That was awful. You're terrible. Whatever those, basically immediate negative things that they say, you got to learn how to train yourself to have an immediate positive reaction, because that's really nothing more than a habit that people have allowed themselves to get into. You do have to kind of get yourself in the frame of mind, for any kind of adverse situation. So if you think about it, really what that is, when you hit a poor shot, you've just kind of now encountered an adverse situation. And if you hadn't prepared yourself through practice how you're going to deal with that, then you're going to default back into whatever your old habits are. And if your old habits are poor and they're either negative self-talk or bad body language or slamming a club, then that's where you're going to go. And that's no different than, a guy who's trying to quit smoking, and he goes into a bar and somebody offers him a cigarette. Well, if that's his habit, that's what he's going to do. But if he's talked to himself about, hey, when somebody does that, I'm going to say, no, I'm good. I'm going to have some peanuts, or I'm going to do whatever. Right. That's just a silly example. But you basically have to train yourself that, no, that's I'm not going to get into that. And I'm going to change this to having an immediate positive reaction. If you were to play golf with me, you would hear, 4, 5, 6 times a day, get a good lie, get a good bounce. Just because that's what's going to come out of my mouth when the ball's kind of immediately offline.
Right.
So, and then once that happens, so that's literally while the ball is still in the air. Now, once the ball has landed, I've watched it go wherever it's going to go, and I may or may not be able to tell if it went in the bunker or the trees. Then you have this brief time period, if you will, where you would have what we call the bag up principle. And the bag up principle is basically allowing yourself 5 to 10 seconds to get upset before you pick your bag up. So during that time frame, you're allowed to slap your leg maybe, or cuss yourself out under your breath. Obviously, I'm not condoning throwing clubs or yelling obscenities, but if you were to play golf with me and I 3-putt from 15 feet, I'm not going to be like, oh, wow, that was lovely. Right? I mean, I'm going to be upset. So during that time frame, from the time when I pick up the ball out of the hole after 3-putting, as I'm walking to the edge of the green, I might be doing something to get that out of my system. And then if I'm carrying my bag, as soon as I pick up my bag, I would make myself do something in the relaxed phase, start a conversation, or, look up in the clouds and make a shape out of the clouds like I'm 7 years old. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
Just something to kind of change the negative vibe and get out of that. Jonathan Bird, one of the things he does is if he makes a birdie or a par or bogey, he can do whatever he wants. But if he makes a double or worse, then going to the next hole, he has to have a conversation with someone, right? And it's just, and it can't be a conversation with his caddy about how did I just do that,
right?
So, but none of these things will work if you don't practice them. If you don't get in the right space beforehand, like if you just go up to the first tee and one of your listeners and they're like, "Oh, I think I'll try that this Saturday. I'm going to try that bag up thing."
Right,
and they 3-putt the second hole, they're going to be like, well, "This is
throwing the bag."
I've heard, yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's going to be this stupid gimmick that's not going to work because you haven't done the mental prep. You haven't done the homework beforehand to talk to yourself about, hey, I'm not going to let myself get upset. I'm going to use this bag up principle, but like nothing's going to bother me today. I don't care if I 3-putt the second hole or if my driver hit breaks on the range or like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you got to have both. You got to have the mental preparation before you get out there, but then you have to have the on course application, because if you only think about being in a good mindset and you didn't really have this bag up principle, well, then what would happen is for 200 yards, you would still be cussing yourself out because you hadn't implemented any tangible way for it to occur. And I understand theory, but I'm way bigger on application of, okay, how does this really play out? That would be the way I would be thinking about it. So
I think that makes perfect sense too. It's one of those things, and I know you've mentioned this early on, as if you're not preparing for it and already doing it a week, 2 weeks, whatever the case may be beforehand, just like you were talking about when it comes to, getting better sleep patterns, getting more hydration in, all those things are things you got to be doing leading up to it. You can't just all of a sudden the night before the tournament say, okay, I'm going to try to get 8 hours of sleep tonight.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that like the best attitude in the world is not going to work if you come up with it on the first tee.
Right.
I mean, It's just not right. So you can't fool yourself into thinking, oh, I heard this, little thing and I'll just go try it out. I mean, if you don't put in the work, you're not going to get the rewards.
Right.
Whether that's physical preparation or whether that's mental preparation, doesn't really matter, But so, and again, as we were talking earlier, when you talk about, you have these 4 different outcomes, I could have good or bad, good. We've mentioned that before on the show. And you've already got it in your mind that the only possible scenario that's going to get me upset is a bad. I have bad execution and I get a bad result. But even when that does happen, this is how I'm going to manage it.
Yeah.
Right? And so, that's just understanding. And some of that just comes with maturity and experience and that sort of thing. But just understanding how to manage poor shots, and that you're not a robot and you're going to get bad breaks, and not just so that you can quote say you have a good attitude, but literally because it's going to be able to sustain your energy so that you can use it when you need to during the math problem and going through your routine. And because if you use up all your mental energy reacting to shots, then you're not going to have it when you need it over the ball. And so it's not just like, oh, you can't have bad body language because it looks bad to someone else. No, you can't. You shouldn't be having bad body language because it's going to mentally drain you, right? And you're not going to be able to focus. And so it's not an etiquette thing. It's a performance thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that whole act different than you feel. I mean, and sometimes you have to fake it, sometimes you have to, even if you're feeling discouraged or upset or frustrated with the way you just hit that shot, you have to fake your body into like, I'm going to still walk up with confidence. I'm going to still have that, same approach, positive approach to this next shot. And eventually your body or your mind anyhow will catch up to that. So,
yeah. You have to think like a champion. You have to walk like a champion. Mm-hmm. You have to hold yourself, accountable to that standard. And, it's funny. We're real quick to point it out in other people, but we're
right.
slow to notice it in ourselves.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And so.
Well, you talk also about this, when speaking of that, you're talking about, it's possible to kind of build all of these things into who you are, that casual, confident persona and some of those things.
Yeah. I think, your style of play and kind of the mode that you go around in needs to go with who you are. And if you're a fast player, then, even if you're trying, and sometimes you get too fast, you're not going to be able to just go completely slow, because that is going to get you so much out of your element. Or, if you're not that fast. So all of that goes together in the sense of kind of how you go around, but all of that has to be woven into your overall process. And again, I don't want to get so into details that, listeners forget. The main thing, if we were to go back to the beginning of the on course part, is you got to have a process to manage yourself and your thinking. And the process that I basically teach is, figure out the math problem. That's refocusing. Go through your routine. That's your preparation. React and execute the shot. That's your swing or your stroke, and then relax in between shots. That doesn't mean that's the only process. I'm sure there are other processes. You just got to find something that works for you. This is how I can go about it, so that, my mind is not jumping around and I'm not in a completely different place if I'm 2 under through 3 or 2 over through 3. The whole point is I'm going to predetermine how I think, and I'm going to let my thinking dictate my play and not vice versa. Most people they go out and their play completely dictates their thinking. And then that's when they start compounding mistakes, either through poor course management or rushing or swinging too hard, or all kind of the bad habits that we can get into when we get out there.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Mo, let's do this if you don't mind. We kind of finished up with the 4 R's there, which I think, to your point, is a really great place to wrap that whole thing up, because it's all process focused and understanding that, it's how to deal and manage with everything that you're going to be encountering on the course. How about, if you don't mind, answering some questions here, because I know some listeners are thinking some of these things, but sure. I'll throw these out there, and just maybe what we'll do is just see what your initial thoughts are on some of these. So,
okay, before we get into that, let me just, one last thing about that.
Yeah.
If you look at anything that I've written or anything, it talks about these 4 R's, and the little R's, as I call them, are the refocus and routine and things we've been going over. And those basically produce the big R, which is the results. And the whole key is, can I focus on the little R's and just stay wherever I'm supposed to be in this process and trust that will produce the results? Because there's always this tension as a competitive athlete. You're trying, and you're going to be evaluated on the results, but just because you're going to be evaluated by that doesn't mean that you can let your mind stay there. Your mind's going to go there. You're going to know you're 2 over, or you shot 41 on the front, or whatever it is. That's not the bad thing, to have a result thought. The bad thing is when you don't have a process to get back into, because now you're going to be stuck on the results.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I never tell a player when they go to the golf course, hey, don't think about the results,
right?
Or don't have a negative thought, or don't get nervous. I say, when those things happen, figure out where you need to be in your process and get back to it. That's the whole key, is to have a foundation that you can go back to, so that when the negative things get in there, because they're going to, you're not just kind of, out there searching, right? Because searching is never a good plan.
No. And I love the fact that you brought that up, because it's so true. And I know that's something Brandon talks a lot about, because I think when people hear process over results, there's this misconception out there that, I should just not focus on the results. Well, if you do that on the PGA Tour, you're not going to be long on the PGA Tour. If you just keep telling your sponsors, Yeah, I was focused on the process the whole time. I know I ended up shooting 8 over, but
I know I haven't made a cut
6.
yet this year, but my process is great.
Dialed in.
Yeah, and you have to learn how to go back and forth between that, because you have to look at the results. That's what stats are, and you have to be able to look at your results, and then that needs to drive, even my bigger process of how I plan my week. And so there's always this back and forth, and neither one is bad or good, or one is better, but they go together. They have this symbiotic relationship where I have to let the results tell me what I need to work on, and then I need to be able to work on my process to drive the results.
Yes. So. Yep. Absolutely. Spot on. I love that. So here's one of the first questions, because this always comes up, is how do I get and remain confident going into a round? I mean, confidence is such a huge thing in athletics. Right.
Well, so my thought on that would be confidence mainly comes from knowing what you're doing. Right. So a lot of times I'll ask my kids, when I say, hey, and we're out on the golf course and we're on the 5th hole, and say, how confident are you right now that you could, get back to my office? Oh yeah, I'm confident. Okay. Well, how confident you are that you could get back to my office and to your car and, get to your hotel without looking at any directions on your phone? Somewhat. Okay. How about if I give you an address in Germany and I said, you got to get there in 24 hours? I'm not very confident in that. Right. Right. And the whole idea is, it's just because what is your knowledge of the situation you're getting ready to go into? Mm-hmm. Right. And so confidence is, I know what I'm getting ready to go into, and I know how I'm going to approach it and handle it. It doesn't mean that I'm going to ultimately have success. Right. But you can go into an event knowledgeable. And that's what I want my players to do is, hey, if you've done your prep and you've worked on the things and you know what you need to think over the ball and you have a process for managing yourself, right, then you can be confident in doing that. And then we'll trust the results. Right. Another thing that I would say that comes up is I don't believe that if there's a difference between commitment and confidence. And it's great when you are confident, but that's not your job on the golf course. Your job on the golf course is to pick committed shots and then trust your routine to execute them. So let's say I got a downhill 6-foot putt, and I'm not sure if it's going to break a little left or a little right. Well, at some point I need to commit that I think it's going right. So I'm going to pick inside left, and I'm committed to that. It's okay that I'm not 100% confident because I've never had this putt before and I don't know. But if you're committed and you trust your routine, things generally tend to work out. And so I tell my players all the time, hey, don't confuse the issue here. You're not expected to be 100% confident over every shot, but you do need to hold yourself to the standard that you got to be committed to the shot you're hitting before you swing the club.
That's an important distinction. It is. It's finish your thought.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I would just want to really make sure that listeners understand committed means I know what I'm getting ready to do. Confident is I know the result that's getting ready to occur. You can't have 100% confidence, maybe other than a 3-inch tap in golf. Right. Yeah. But you can go out and be committed. And if you're committed, more often than not, then things are going to work out, and you're going to get the results that are indicative of your play at that time.
And by the way, we don't have time to wait for you to get confident before this shot. You know what I mean?
Right. If you just let's take a shot that everybody knows. So the 18th, let's go the 17th tee shot at TPC, the Island Green, the wind's swirling, and it's in March. And so let's say we got a nor'easter coming in. And so now it's blowing a good 15, 20 miles an hour. And, the wind's blowing left to right and the pin's on the right. Well, you can't be 100% confident that I'm going to hit this and this is exactly what the ball is going to do, because the wind bounces around in there, because it's basically like you're, in a coliseum or something.
Right.
But you can be committed that I'm going to hit it right there at that flag. and I can do some things that can help me, as opposed to hitting a wedge up into the wind. I'm going to chip an 8-iron and keep my ball flight down, and I'm going to commit to that because that gives me the best chance of kind of landing it on the front or middle of the green and giving myself the best chance with the most space. Those types of things you can do, but you can't be 100% confident that, oh, well, this is going to work out exactly the way, I think it is.
Right.
Here's what I love about that. The way that this all kind of marries together, Mo, is if I commit to that, and I'm not trying to be a one-trick pony tonight, but if I go back to my grid of good, bad, bad, good, that commitment plays directly into that whole mindset of I can live with whatever I got, right? I mean, unless I just completely shank it, I'm okay, and I can relax, and I can go into this next shot with confidence still.
Right, 100%, and I think that plays out in terms of both your communication with your caddy. Okay, we know we're committed right there, and this is what we're doing. Versus, I got it. I'm gonna hit a good shot. Well, that's not good communication between a caddy and a player, and it plays out even in things that we don't even think about that are 6 hours later. If you've hit committed shots all day long, right, and then you didn't get the results, you'll sleep pretty good that night.
Sure you will.
Right?
Yeah.
If you didn't hit committed shots and you made a lot of mental mistakes, that's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night. And to me, to some degree, it's all a percentages game. If you have hit committed shots all day, it doesn't mean they're all going to work out, but the percentages are going to work in your favor. If you go out and you hit uncommitted shots, the percentages are not going to work out. Doesn't mean you might not get lucky every now and then, for sure. But that's kind of the way I think about it. It's just you have control over committing to a target and picking the shot you want to hit. So you should hold yourself to do that. You don't control, what kind of bounce a ball gets, or if the wind dies, or certain things like that. So
no, I think it's a valid, really, really good point, because, we see examples of this all the time. Not too long ago, I think I shared it with you and Brandon both. There was a video of Jordan Spieth who, hits a shot and just wasn't committed to it. And the whole next, 5 minutes is just him talking to his caddy about how he doubted confident or not, he was like, I should have hit that. I knew I should have just done this. I knew it, because that was standing over the ball and just not being committed to it. So, that was a prime example there. I think I know how you're going to answer this next question, because I've been paying close attention to all 4 shows. But here's the question is, why do I often struggle starting my round?
Well, it could be a couple different things. Probably the biggest reason you struggle starting your round is you're trying to play great right out of the get-go. And now you've backed yourself into a corner where if it doesn't go great, I'm going to be upset and I'm going to get frustrated. And one of the things I tell college kids all the time is, one of your biggest problems is you're trying to play great. I want you to go out and try to play solid and commit to this process, and then let the results play out. But college kids in particular, because now they've gotten control of the ball and they've shot some scores in the 60s, and they're good players, but they have in their mind, I should be this by this. I should be 2 under by 5. And if it doesn't go that way, they've invested so much into that emotionally that they just kind of crash. And so maybe they didn't have the game on that given day to shoot 68, but they had the game to shoot 71 or 72. But because they weren't 2 under through 5, right, they turned what should have been 71 or 72 into 76 or 77 because they emotionally got so down or got so angry or got so technical or whatever their default is. People default into different kind of areas. And so that's one of the biggest things. Every now and then you'll get some players who start off poor because they're kind of not into it enough, and maybe they're a little apathetic, but that's probably 5% of the time, and 95% of the time they're too amped up. They're trying to play too good. They're too emotional. All they have is result thoughts. They don't have their keys for the day. And so they know what they want to achieve, but they don't have the controllable actions to go with it. And it doesn't work out well.
Yeah. And you hit it right. I mean, exactly what I was thinking was they say, I want to be 3 under after 4 holes or whatever. And if that plan doesn't work out, then all of a sudden it's, everything just starts to fall apart.
Hey, they need to go to the Brandon Allen school of, I haven't lost 3 balls yet. So let's roll.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So here's one, and I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit in some of the other shows, but I know this is such a popular question is, why can't I hit it on the course like I do on the range?
Well, the honest answer is you're probably not that good on the range.
I love that.
But because the way you're setting up your practice is you hit a lot of shots in a row to one unchanging target. So you get all this feedback and you adjust, and you think by the 8th ball, and you're now hitting it at your target through adjustment and feedback, that's how you're going to hit it on the golf course. And so, that's the primary reason is you don't really understand how to practice and how to set it up and that sort of thing. If you are good at changing targets and you really do have a proper way of evaluating your performance on the range, and you know that you are changing targets and you're going through your routine and then you're not hitting it well on the course, then, it's likely that you're maybe not trusting your routine when you get out there. Or it could be various other factors. It could be wind direction. It could be some other things. But more than likely, people just don't have an accurate assessment of how they perform. And most people leave the range, overconfident.
Right.
So that's what I would, encourage listeners to really do is make sure that when you go to the range, yes, hit some shots and get some feedback and adjust your swing to improve your true competence, but then make sure you're changing your targets and making it more like you're on the golf course, and hit your driver and then hit your 7-iron and then hit a wedge and then hit another driver and visualize some holes. That's going to give you a more accurate assessment of, okay, how am I really performing today? And that can help you with your course management, as you go out, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
and don't just spend the whole time trying to hit the guy on the range card.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, one thing that might come up, I'm just thinking of listeners is, especially with their kids and that sort of thing, is music. And, 30 years ago, nobody wore headphones in practice. Now you see a lot of kids wearing headphones in practices and parents don't like it. So the whole thing on that is it's fine if you're going to do that when you're doing your kind of mechanics block practice. It's okay to have some music, right?
Okay.
The real thing you have to be careful with music is if you use music, right, all the time that you practice, that becomes an artificial occupier of your mind.
Right.
So it blocks out these negative thoughts. And then when you get on the golf course and you don't now have the music, right, now it's much easier for the thought of don't miss this on the low side or don't hit it out of bounds to the right to jump in there because you don't have the music playing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That inner voice is amplified, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The inner voice gets amplified. So my thinking on music is it's fine if you're doing your block practice and you got to do 20 or 30 minutes of just kind of boring mechanics putting practice. I get that. But you can't then go putt around and play your games and do that and putt pretty well and think that's how you're going to perform on the course because, we're not comparing apples to apples.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, let's stay right in that same lane because I know I want to say it was show 2. We started, actually it was show 3. We started talking about those controllable keys to your round. Like what are the 2 or 3 or 4 things you're going to really be dialed in to focus on? And, the question is, what's the difference between a key, so one of those focus keys, and an occupying thought or sensation?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So in your routine, in your pre-shot routine, we talked about it has a physical component, which is what you do. It has a visual component, which is how you process the golf course visually. And then it has a mental component. And the mental component is this occupying thought, such as saying 1, 2, or tick-tock during my putting stroke, or right before I swing the club, thinking about taking it back straight. So an occupying thought is something very specific that you use in your mental routines. So for me, or let's don't go with me. Let's go with a player. Nick Watney, his occupying thoughts, right, in the 3 different parts of his game where he counted from 1 to 6 in his putting. Mm-hmm. He thought about hitting it to his landing spot in his short game. And then he thought about keeping his width in his backswing during the long game. So those are 3 very specific occupying thoughts for 3 different routines. A key is a kind of a bigger general principle for the day. So a key might be, I'm going to do great routines, mm-hmm. and I'm not going to get sloppy. Or another key might be, nothing is going to bother me. It doesn't matter if I start off with a double or if I start off with 3 birdies in a row, I'm not going to get amped up. So a key is a bigger, all-encompassing kind of concept for the entire day. And an occupying thought is something very specific in a mental routine that you use during the 6 to 8 shots that it takes you to get into your routine and execute your shot. Mm-hmm. That makes sense?
Yep, yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
So last 2 questions, and we'll turn you loose here. So this one, and I'm going to kind of do these in this particular order. So what do we do when we're swinging poorly? You're just out there and you just don't have it. I don't care. Right. We can go through 50 million things, but this is me every round, by the way, just, right. So you know.
So this isn't really a question from a listener. Right?
That's right. Just me.
He's just looking for some advice.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
That's right.
So when you're swinging poorly, basically what you want to do is you want to give yourself kind of 2 lists. This is a list of things I can change, and this is the list of things that I can't change, right? And let's just start with the things that you can't change. One thing that you cannot do, no matter how talented you are on the golf course, you cannot see yourself swing, okay? So you cannot see where the club is, and you cannot tell exactly where your right elbow is because you're consumed with making sure you don't whiff it and actually hit the golf ball, right? So you can't see yourself swing the club. And because of that, right, you have to understand that your feel will lie to you. And so it feels like I'm doing one thing and I take a lesson and I go watch the video with my teacher, and that's clearly not what I'm doing, right? So because of that basic kind of, I don't know if it's a fact, but the fact that you can't see yourself swing and that your feel will lie to you, you want to make sure that I'm not going to get into changing my swing, because if I guess wrong, if I think it's one thing and I guess wrong, now I have just doubled my problems.
Yep.
Right. And every time that happens, it gets considerably worse. So you went from one potential problem and now you've tried to change it twice. And now you got 4 different things going on because you hadn't fixed the problem and you've introduced something new. So you don't change your swing or your swing thought. So if I know, if Nick Watney knows he's going to keep his width and that's what he's going to focus on that day, then he's not going to be like, oh, well, maybe I read this article in Golf Digest and I think I'll just try this, right? So you would stick with that. The only exception to that would be if you already have a predetermined go-to shot, like we talked about, I think in probably the session on practice. But if you have a predetermined go-to shot, which you should have, listeners, if you don't have that, go make sure you develop that this off season. And that would be what you could go to, especially off the tee.
Yeah.
Right? That's where you're going to make the most costly mistakes. So if you have you're hitting your driver poor, you can go to your go-to shot. That's the only exception to kind of quote changing your swing or your swing thought. But other than that, the things that you can change, and you're saying, well, And the reason you need to change it is because you keep hitting the ball to the right. You got to do something. I mean, you just can't keep hitting it right all day, right? Your job is to just manage the ball the best that you can to get the hole in the ball as quickly as possible. That's your only objective in golf. Yep. Manage the ball to get it in the hole as quickly as possible. So I got to do something. I can't change my swing or my swing thought. So what can I do? Well, you can do things that won't lie to you. And those are mainly pre-swing things. So if we were to go through those real quick, first would be aim. Aim is the club face. And where's the club face aim? People get those confused, but aim is your club face. Alignment is your body relative to the club face. So you could have good aim, but poor alignment, or you could have good alignment, but poor aim, or you could have both of them be poor, obviously. So you could change either one of those. You could change your posture. That's one that comes up for me all the time. I don't practice very much. And so what happens is, especially if I'm playing a few days in a row, my posture gets poor. And so basically I don't keep my butt stuck back far enough and I don't have room to swing. So I'm making these swings and the ball goes out to the right, but it's not because my swing is going to the right. It's because my posture isn't good and my swing has to go out to the right. That makes sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So by tweaking my posture, it gives my swing a better chance to work. So that would be a third one. Fourth one would be ball position. And ball position has two components. I could get closer to it or further away from it, or I could move the ball up in my stance or back in my stance. Right. So, that will work depending on, if you know what you're doing with it.
Right.
And all of these make the assumption that you have some idea of, I'm not just trying something new, but I know these are kind of my default areas. And then your tempo. So tempo is really the only one that occurs during the swing. But even when you say tempo, most people don't understand. I think there's basically at least 4 parts to your tempo, which is your takeaway off the ball. That's my default, is I get too quick in my takeaway, right? It could be in your transition at the top of your swing. It could be the overall pace of your swing, or it could be that you're actually decelerating when you come into the ball and you need to keep up your speed at impact. So, for me, I know if I go out and I'm not swinging poor, and it is when things go poor. It's not if, because it's going to happen. Right? Yeah. So when things go poor, the first 2 things I'm going to check, or that I'm allowed to kind of manipulate, are making sure that I got my posture where it needs to be and I'm keeping my butt back so that my swing has room to work, and that my first foot to foot and a half off the ball, I'm not getting real quick, because then I get all out of sequence. Right. Yeah. So that's, like Zach Johnson, if he's not putting well, the first thing he is going to check is ball position. His stroke is so repeatable that just moving the ball, a quarter of an inch up or back, right, can make the ball get off line left or right. But it has nothing to do with his stroke. It's just, man, you got the ball just a little bit up or just a little bit back. That happens with so many of these guys. What most listeners don't understand is the swings and the strokes are so repeatable on the PGA Tour. They are correcting 90% of the time things that occur before the swing of the stroke ever occurs. Yeah. That's where the fix is. Yep. It's not during the motion. The motion is already very repeatable. But by having the club face open or having my feet too far to the right or the ball it changes everything.
Yeah. It's the same with baseball. I mean, something Brandon and I are very familiar with is the fact that, it's either pitch selection or you're just not on time. I mean, but your swing can be really good and you're still missing out on that. So here's the last question. It's kind of a combination of, because it's came in a couple of different ways. One person asked, what do I have to do to maximize my game? But I'll ask it this other way, because I think this is one that all the listeners are probably thinking right now. So as a player, competitive player at any level, what do I have to be great at to keep getting better?
Well, I think there's a few things. I would say, if we break them down, if we're kind of breaking it down across all the different areas, right? On course, practice and prep, off course. In terms of practice, right? you have to understand how a score is put together, and you have to be great at practicing your scoring and keeping yourself engaged, right? You're never going to be a great golfer because you can hit your 6-iron great because you don't use it enough, right? So you have to make sure you understand the game and that you're able to put together a practice plan that is going to maximize your score, just not make you feel better at the end of the day. That would be one thing. In terms of on course, you have to be great at managing your mind for this 8 to 10 seconds in your routine. Now, all of the R's are important and they're kind of interdependent with one another. But, for sure, one of the things that is just we cannot get past, it's a huge bottleneck, is you can do everything great in practice. You can have so many things good off the golf course. If you can't learn how to manage your mind for 8 to 10 seconds, we can literally give away 10 to 20 hours of work in these 8 to 10 second spurts. Yeah. Because you don't know how to keep your mind occupied. Other stuff's jumping in there. And now I'm just playing emotional golf. And so I would say, you have to be great at that on the course. If we were to say off course, I think you have to be great at compartmentalizing and understanding how things fit together and understand that, things don't happen in a vacuum. Right. Yeah. And, if you're not paying attention to these other areas, they're going to start showing up on the golf course. And everybody can get away with certain things for a while. But if we're talking about elite, consistent play over years and years, you're not going to be able to get away with that, is my thinking. So those would be, at least some of the main things. I got to understand how the game's put together and make sure that I'm practicing that and maximizing that. I got to be able to manage my mind for 8 to 10 seconds, and I got to have a process. And then I got to be able to, just understand how all the pieces fit together so that I'm not just jumping from one thing to another, and you got to have the patience to allow that to play out.
Well, I think it's a great way to kind of end this whole collection because, quite frankly, one of the things we have always liked about the show is, it's the Mental Advantage podcast, but we like the acronym MAP is we want to give listeners that map to how they can get themselves from where they are to where they want to be and, be successful in this. And one of the things that, I am confident and committed to is the fact that if people will listen, those of you, if you're just tuning into show 4 and you missed the first 3 shows, go back and listen because, Dr. Mo has definitely given you all a map, just summed it up perfectly there in the end with the fact that, there's you have to be great at all of these different segments because quite frankly, with the players you're dealing with, that margin of error is so small as far as, the difference between the number 1 money winner on the tour and the last guy is not a whole lot of strokes. I think I read somewhere it's even less than like 2 or something like that. So to your point, if they're giving up any of those shots, 8 to 10 seconds, because they just can't get themselves refocused or whatever, that's a huge deal. And it's the same thing, whether you're out playing some Nassau on the weekends with some of your buddies or whatever the case may be, all of the things you've unpacked over the last 4 shows is really, I think, given people a lot that they can use out there. So,
right.
Closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think, you got to decide, okay, what level am I trying to get to? Mm-hmm. And what is the plan to get to that level? Because if you want to shoot, 90, that's one level. If you want to shoot 75, that's a different thing.
Right.
And, and what level you want to compete at? Is that just kind of a local level, or are you trying to play on a national amateur level? Or, I think Brandon brought it up on one of the earlier shows. And I had this discussion with a couple of tour guys. We're sitting around at lunch yesterday, and, there's basically 200 guys that can play on the PGA Tour every year that have some sort of status and, that sort of thing. There's probably at least 4,000 to 5,000 who have the physical capability, meaning they have the swing speed and they can do those things, but they don't have the discipline and the commitment to do all the dirty work over and over and over. Because anybody likes to play good and anybody likes to score good. And I think it was Joe Paterno said, the will to win is not nearly as important as the will to prepare to win.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole key is, okay, well, who's going to go put in the work? And yes, you're going to do 4 hours of, putting practice a week, and it's not going to be that much fun, but you got to get it done.
Yeah.
know? And if you start cutting edges, it won't be very long before you'll find yourself outside of the top 200. You got a conditional card, and the next thing
happens fast.
And just the way it goes. Yeah.
Well, Mo, we certainly we can't thank you enough. I mean, the fact that, and we've told you this before off the air, where when we first reached out to you, I thought, man, it will be just awesome if we can get him on a show. And then when you were like,
on a show,
on a show, and then when you're like, hey, let's, I got some things we can really unpack here over a series. And we were just thrilled. And it's everything we thought it would be. And we know it takes a lot of time out of your schedule, which is not like it's, you have just all the time in the world. So we know, we know that you've been very, very gracious to us. And as Brandon said, we're definitely going to be thinking this is not the end of Dr. Mo being on this, the Mental Advantage podcast, because, I think we're going to get rid of like half our listeners if that's the case.
Well, it should be called the Mo Advantage at this point.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate it. Those are kind words, and it's been fun, and I've enjoyed it. And I think it helps me. Anytime you have to, to teach what you're doing, it makes you question your own thoughts, and it makes you question, is this what I really believe in? And I've spent the last 20 something years doing this, and you're thinking. I believe it should always be questioned and challenged, and that's how it evolves, right? And so, I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll be back in, a few months, and I'll be, hey, that thing I said earlier?
Forget all that. It happens all the time for me. So you'll be in good company.
Yeah. So
awesome.
But, I really enjoyed it, guys, and look forward to watching this last major. And then, we'll have to think up, where we want to jump back in, and maybe the Ryder Cup. That's coming up. That's kind of a different
my
beast.
favorite golf event.
That would be great.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things we could get into at the Ryder Cup, because I mean that's a whole different level of
competition. Well, I think we've settled it. There
it is.
We got listeners, you heard. So they're all like marking the date right now. Okay, I can stop listening until the week before the Ryder Cup.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Awesome.
Well, Mo, we thank you, and safe travels. I know you're out there touring around with everybody, so safe travels getting back there to Georgia, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good, guys.
All right, take care.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.